Grit, determination, heart. What's missing? Hi, I'm Aaron Muller, and this is episode 18 of the Cobsmacked Podcast. This is a Nebraska football podcast where we cover the Huskers season and team news as it progresses throughout the year. Every video episode is uploaded to YouTube, and the audio versions can be found on Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you enjoyed the content, please consider leaving a like and following, sharing it to your friends and family. It helps me spread the podcast and reach more ears. Looking at this week's recap, we have the Week 10 matchup against the number 5 Ohio State Buckeyes. The ending score was OSU had 26, Nebraska had 17. Getting into the stats right away, so Nebraska had 248 passing yards. We had 113 rushing yards for a total of 361 yards on 65 plays. Ohio State had 405 passing yards with 90 on the ground for 495 total yards on 84 plays. Looking at the defenses, Nebraska's defense had 2 sacks, 5 tackles for losses, and 2 interceptions. Buckeyes had 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 1 interception. Special teams, we had 1 for 3 on field goals, and we had 8 punts for an average of 43.1 yards. They made 4 for 4 on their field goals with 4 punts for 40.5 yards average. First downs, we had 18 to their 25. We had the ball for 26 minutes and 8 seconds. They had it for 33 minutes and 52 seconds. And penalties, we had 6 for 60 yards, and they had 8 for 65 yards. Takeaways from the stats there. So we struggled to sustain drives. As I mentioned, that was being one of the keys going into the game, that our offense is going to need to sustain drives, get first downs, move the ball, both to stay on the field longer for the time of possession, but also to give the defense a break, give them some time off the field. We weren't able to do that as well as we would have liked. We only had 18 first downs on 14 drives, so a little over 1 first down per drive. And there was just a lot of drives where we had to punt it. As I said, we punted it 8 times. So there was a lot of drives that ended in no score, no points, and that was hard. We went 2 for 13 on third downs, and so we just weren't effective at getting the short yard gains, picking up first downs. We weren't effective at that. The offensive line struggled to match up against the Buckeyes' defensive line. Pass block grade that our offensive line got was only 40.8 out of 100. So they weren't able to give protection. We were more effective on the running part of it than I thought we would be against the Buckeyes. Our run game was always kind of there. It was always present. Ramir Johnson was the only running back that had carries in the game, but he never really broke open. We never really wore them down to the point where we were able to bust off big runs. I think his longest of the night was like a 12-yard run maybe. 12-yard run for him. And the longest run of the night was Adrian Martinez had a 21-yard scramble. So it was always there, but it never really broke open for us. The running grade for the offensive line was 73.2. So there's a major difference there. It's 33 points difference as far as if we're able to block passing plays as opposed to blocking running schemes. So that being said, Adrian had a hard time on the night. He played hard, but the pressure ended up just being too much for him. He took 5 sacks for 31 lost yards on the sacks, and he had the defensive line in his face almost every snap. They didn't need to blitz linebackers or corners in. The defensive line was getting through just fine, and that heavily influenced the accuracy and the rhythm of the offense. He wasn't able to kind of get in a rhythm. He never knew if he was going to have time to throw or if he was just going to immediately have a guy on him as soon as he got the ball. That led to a 50% completion rate from Adrian, and that's how it's been the last few weeks because he's not able to scramble as effectively as he has been because he's been dealing with some injuries. His 1 interception that he did have on there came on the last drive of the game to end it. We were already down by 10 or 2-score game, so we were down by 9. We had to score 2 times in a minute and 20 seconds, and that just wasn't going to happen. So interception was kind of a throwaway thing. But the turnovers weren't bad. He did fumble at one time when he got hit in the back. The guy he didn't see him coming. Again, that's happened multiple times this year. People kind of are hard on quarterbacks when that happens. Like, they made a mistake there, but if you don't know the guy's coming and he's there fast, like he's going to hit you and you're not going to be ready for it and you're going to drop the ball. Luckily, we were able to jump on top of that fumble, so that wasn't a turnover, but we only had 1 turnover on the night, so that was nice compared to what we were dealing with against Purdue. Like I mentioned, he was dealing with an injury, but we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that did play a part in the offense's inability to get things going, and the offense just wasn't able to help the defense in the game. Flipping over to the defense, the Black Shirts played outstandingly. They played a great game, put forth great effort. Everybody did on the defensive side of things. We forced 2 interceptions, and it could have been 4. JoJo dropped one that kind of hit him right in the chest, and he dropped it. And then Cam Taylor-Britt also dropped one in the first half. They did get the 2 interceptions, but they did allow their young wide receiver that I mentioned, Jackson Smith-Njigba. He caught 15 passes for 240 yards. That is the second most receiving yards that a receiver has had against a Nebraska defense since like 1998. So he kind of really went off. They were down a wide receiver going into the game, but this guy I mentioned, he was young. Their quarterback being a freshman, CJ Stroud. You're going to see these guys going forward for the next 3 or 4 years. You're going to see them play together a lot. There's going to be a lot of games like this for them. The defensive line for Ohio State or for Nebraska, defensive line got into the backfield a lot of times, which kind of surprised me. I was expecting us to have to blitz more, but I knew that was going to be costly on the passing side of things. But our defensive line was able to get back there quite a bit on their own. JoJo Doman did have an outstanding performance as the linebacker crew goes. He had 9 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 interception, and then 1 almost interception. As I mentioned, it hit him in the chest, and he just wasn't able to hold on to it. It was probably one of his best games as a Husker, and for good reason. Now that we no longer have a chance to go to a bowl game, it's kind of being tossed around now that could possibly be his last game in a Big Red uniform. So if he does turn his preparation towards the NFL, we wish him luck and things like that. But that's hard to see a guy go out that's put so much into the program over the last 5 years that he never got a return on that investment by getting to a postseason. So Garrett Nelson forced a strip sack fumble. He had a good night. He hit the guy. He hit CJ Stroud. He kind of rolled out to the left. Garrett Nelson hit in the back, made him fumble it. But again, they were able to jump on top of that. So we didn't get that fumble, but it was a big play nonetheless. It was nice to see him have an impact because you always see him and he always has his motor going. He's always trying, and he's still young. So he's going to have time to develop. We're going to see a lot of Garrett Nelson going forward. He's one of my favorite guys on the defense just because of his relentless effort to get to the quarterback and the way he talks about it. He's very professional when it comes to football. He's very focused on what he needs to do to get better. And he talked about JoJo Doman in the post game, how much JoJo's been an impactful person in his life, not just in football, but in life in general. And it's kind of a brotherhood there. Adrian mentions the same thing. That's kind of a brotherhood there. So that's nice to see that there's more to the team than just football on top of things. Getting back to football, though. So we held the top offense in the country to only 26 points in a game. We held them to only field goals in the second half. They kicked 3 field goals in the second half, but no touchdowns. We just needed help from the offense and special teams, and they just couldn't get it. So it's unfortunate for the Black Shirts that they came out and they played such a great game, and they just didn't get the win for their performance. Special teams, as I mentioned, they let us down as well. So they reared its ugly head once again. We've had spots throughout the season where they have had issues either kicking field goals, shanking punts, stopping people from returning touchdowns, and it just happened again. We had sophomore kicker Chase Contreras. He struggled. He did come in. He missed a 45-yarder at the beginning, and I mean, it's 45 yards. You're not really upset that he missed that. It's 45 yards out. But then he made a 39-yard field goal before half. So you're like, okay, he can still make these field goals. Later in the game, it was fourth quarter. We had a 4th and 4, and we were close to the end zone. I think it was like on the 12-yard line. You thought maybe Scott Frost would go for it here because even if we don't get it, they're in a tough position being that close to their own goal line. But he brought in the kicking unit, and Chase Contreras missed a 31-yard field goal with 9 minutes and 47 seconds left in the game, where if we would have gone for it and gotten that touchdown, we would have been up by a point. So there's a lot of people questioning that call itself, but I mean, he just wasn't able to kick it through anyway. So he missed 2 field goals at 6 points. Pristup punted well, except for a shank in the second quarter, which netted only 13 total yards. And that resulted in a short field for Ohio State, and they ended up getting a touchdown on that drive. So, I mean, the 6 missed points from the missed field goals, and then essentially 7 points that you got off of a shanked punt that you gave away to them. That's 13 total swing points that we missed from special teams, and we only lost the game by 9 points. So again, special teams really had an impact on the outcome of the game, and that's just unfortunate. On Ohio State's side, however, Noah Ruggles, their kicker, as I mentioned, coming into the game, he was incredibly consistent. He remains that way. He was perfect for kicking on 4 of 4 for field goals, and so I think he's like 15 for 15 on the season for field goals, and then all other point afters as well. Overall, Huskers once again played a top 5 team really well, very well. They could have won the game, as we've been saying every time this year, but mistakes and a lackluster offense really cost the game again. Blackshirts did enough to win the game once again, but what more could you reasonably ask them to do if you watch the game again? As I was watching it, and it was towards the end of the game, you were like, oh, if we could just get one more interception. We already had 2, and we weren't able to score on them. That's terrible for the defense's motivation and focus on the defense for them to get 2 turnovers and then have no points result from that. That's got to be disheartening, that you're doing your job almost to perfection, to the best of your ability, and then you're still losing games because the other 2 aspects of your team can't help you out. You could probably say, hey, they should have gotten more 3 and outs, but you held, like I said, you held the best offense. Most people would consider to be the best offense. Ohio State, you held them to 26 points, 2 interceptions on 14 drives. That should have been enough to win the game. But the offense struggled with consistency. Adrian didn't always have time to make throws. We knew early in the season, as we watched the offensive line and the struggles that they had, that this was going to be a long season as far as protection goes. But even when he did have time to throw, which was very rarely, when he did have time to throw, the wide receivers couldn't get separation from the cornerbacks. They couldn't get separation over the middle. We just had struggle keeping up with the talent on Ohio State side all over the field, and the wide receivers just couldn't get the separation that Adrian needed to get rid of the ball earlier. He did have a beautiful 72-yard pass to Toure, who had a nice evening. He had 4 completions for 150 yards. The rest of the wide receivers, though, had 41 total yards on 15 targets. Only 5 of them came down with completions. So 1 out of every 3 passes thrown to the different wide receivers came down with it. That's got to be rough. Not only can you not throw it enough, but then when you do throw it, they're not coming down with the ball. We had more success on chunk plays as opposed to like the little dink and dunk passes to get the first downs here and there. We had more success with those because it's more of a one-on-one in that situation rather than trying to go for short fields where there's more coverage units there. But the big plays are hit and miss. You're not going to hit them all the time. And then even if you do get them, there's no guarantee that it's going to work. And they're high risk because then you have a higher chance for somebody to poke in there and get an interception. And also, if you're holding on to the play longer to help that play develop, then you have more of a chance of taking a sack in that situation as well. And given the pass coverage, that's more likely to happen with Nebraska. The offensive line was the main issue, but Martinez was dealing with injuries, as I mentioned, and that affected the offense as well. Martinez, as he mentioned later in the game, I actually think that this came out during the week, right after I put the preview out, that it came out that he was dealing with a fractured jaw. He broke his jaw against Michigan State. I remember, if you remember watching that, I'll see if I can get a clip for it, but he took a hit kind of right under the chin, and he looked like he was maybe worried that he was missing teeth. He was worried that he kept feeling his teeth. Turns out his jaw got broken in that hit. He opted out against surgery that would have ended the season effectively for him to stay with the team and help them go forward, but that's something he's been dealing with. That shows you his toughness, and that's been addressed by different players on the team, that he's one of the toughest guys out there, even though he never makes a big deal about it himself. We can have criticisms and stuff with him all the time, but as people say, like, you don't know what's going on behind the curtain. That's a pretty big what if. Like, what if he didn't break his jaw? Would his season have continued on the trajectory that it was going earlier in the season? Not only the broken jaw, but he was also dealing with that high ankle sprain that he had against Michigan. So if you remember, towards the end of the game, Aiden Hutchinson kind of rolled up on him. I don't think it was intentional. People think he went low on purpose, but I don't think it was intentional. But he kind of rolled up on Adrian, and Adrian's been dealing with that ankle sprain ever since then. It's very limiting to his explosiveness on his scrambling ability. So he is still able to run. This was probably against Ohio State. This was probably his best running performance since that Michigan game. He's just been trying to recoup from that, but he still had 9 runs for 82 yards if you take out the sack yardage. He, like I said, it was 31 yards that we lost on sack yardage, but 82 yards from your quarterback is still pretty good, but they weren't like huge chunk plays. Like you've seen earlier in the year, he ran off 50 yards, 71 yards, 72 yards. He was able to just go very quickly. And now he's limited. He's still able to go on you. He's still able to scramble, but he's not able to do it at the extent to which he was doing earlier in the season. Special teams reverted back to its inconsistent behavior. We missed the 2 crucial field goals. We lost the field position battle on the punting side of things. And Ohio State had dynamic return people. We did not, or at least we didn't try to return anything. But we kept them in check on most of the returns. So that's not a huge issue. But the fact that those, I mean, like Frost said, so like those are hidden yardage. We didn't have a return for more than like 12 yards. Yeah, Alante Brown had the longest. 19 yards was a return. Otherwise, it was all fair catches. That's got to be something. We got to find somebody that's able to make something out of something. I mean, there's something there. You can take some of those. Some of those you question why they don't bring them out. But, I mean, they have the guys to do it. We have some guys, I'm sure. I think we're just afraid at this point, given how special teams has hurt us previously this year. The shanked punt, the questionable interference call, there was one where we got flagged for like interference on the return on Ohio State. The guy didn't touch him. He ran in front of him, and they called that interference on the catch. I've never heard of that, never seen that, and it gave them great position in that drive, ended in points for them. Looking at the win and loss for this game, the loss means another losing season without a bowl game. That's rough, as I mentioned, for the guys that have been there, the guys that decided to come back for this 5th year, the guys that haven't been to a bowl game since they came to Nebraska. That's not a tradition that you want your players to hold on to, and that's going to be rough on the recruiting side of things as well. Hey, come here. We haven't played a bowl game since 2016. That's rough. Like, that's hard to do. Like, that's a hard sell. There is improvement without a doubt, though. I'm not going to be all negative here. There was improvement. If you watch this game and you think that there was no improvement from Nebraska, you're out of your mind. If you go back to that 2016 season, or I think it was 2016, 2014, somewhere in there, we got blown out. It was like 62-7 from Ohio State. And this is a much better Ohio State than that team was. I feel. Opinions. All of them are opinions. But we at least kept it close. All year we've been keeping it close. Aside from this game, every one of our losses has been one score. You hate hearing that. That's repetitive. It's tiresome. As long as, as well as like this close. We're this close. We're this close. We're so close. That remark is overused and it's tiresome at this point. But there's so much more going on under the surface that we are closer and you can feel it, but you're just not seeing it. So the wins and losses are more immediate indicators of success. There's people that can only see success if you have wins and losses, but there's so much more to football than that. There's so much more to football than just the final score. There's so much that goes on in that 60 minutes that's going to lead to that end result. The team has a lot more intangibles now than we did in prior seasons. We lacked in prior seasons. The fight that we talk about, the unwillingness to quit, that hasn't always been there. That's been an issue that we dealt with. We did not like to see our teams just give up and get blown out by 50 points. And we haven't had to deal with that. So, I mean, that's an improvement on its own, and that's an improvement I'm willing to take. We would love to see more wins, obviously. I'm not going to say I don't want wins. I want these close games. I want the team to be competitive in every game. If this is how it starts out, and then you have more hope going forward that eventually you're going to start winning more of these coin toss games, that's something I'm willing to happen rather than win easy games, but then get blown out by the big games. I don't want to see that. That wasn't fun at any point, whether it be Bo Pelini or Mike Riley. That wasn't fun to catch a guy off guard one week, but then get blown out by a team the next week. That wasn't something you wanted to see. This season has been a roller coaster of the fire, not fire Scott Frost on Twitter, on social media, all over the place. But I think I mentioned this on Twitter too. I think we're going to get there sooner than people think. I think that people are way too ready to get rid of Frost and bring in some new guy where we start from scratch. The culture's getting built, though. The culture is something that was going to take time to build. The players are going to have to also be in on that. It's not just all head coaches. The assistant coaches, there needs to be some changes there. I will digress on that point. But head coach can only do so much as the head coach. The players need to take accountability on themselves as well. Like team leadership, there needs to be seniors, captains on the team that are helping the team solidify as well. But I mentioned this on Twitter that we need to give Scott Frost room to grow as well. As that culture grows, as the players develop, as the schemes develop, he needs time to grow as a head coach as well. Because look back, he only had 2 years of experience as a head coach before he got hired to Nebraska. That was at a smaller program with easier opponents and an easier conference and a bigger talent pool in Florida. I do think that he knew that this job was going to be hard when he took it. It wasn't an easy sell. He had to have the talk with Tom Osborne to convince him to come here because there was a total rebuild that needed to happen here, and he knew that. He came in here with that expectation that it was going to be a big rebuild, but it was going to be able to happen within 4 years. I think hitting the Big Ten Conference was a big splash of cold water that he wasn't expecting. I think that the big size and the hard-fought battles, every team in the Big Ten will give you a battle every week. There's no easy wins in the Big Ten. And I think that was kind of a splash of cold water for him. I don't think he was expecting to come in here and struggle as much as he did, especially with the offense that he wanted to run. You've seen him pivot and adjust his offensive schemes a little bit to kind of fit the Big Ten more. He had to adjust his offense. He had to adjust his player expectations, and he had to adjust the personnel that he was trying to bring in as well. So he is growing as a head coach. We need to allow that to happen. We can't just expect this to all happen overnight, especially given the last few regimes, how they've ended. With the exception of Bo Pelini, I mean, he won games, yes, but there was a deterioration there in some regard. Not team-wise. The team loved Bo Pelini. He was a great coach in that regard. It's just like recruiting and things like that weren't going his way. But again, he was a head coach that would have grown. If you had given Bo Pelini time, I'm sure he would have figured those things out as well. Frost is a good guy to let grow. We have an idle week coming up, though, looking forward. So we have the idle week coming up, the bye week. That gives the team another chance to get as healthy as you can this late in the season. But after that, we have a big game at Wisconsin, and then we come back home and end the season with Iowa. As the players have said, as there has been floating around on Twitter too, we can still ruin some seasons this year. We have Wisconsin, who's kind of been on a roll. You have Iowa that's been kicking our butt for the last 8 years now. I think we can realistically be in these two games. Iowa specifically, I feel like this is probably one of the best chances we have to beat them. But we're no longer playing for the bowl game, so I hope that doesn't play too much into it. Listening to the players, though, they're still playing for pride at this point. They're still playing for brotherhood. I just wonder if JoJo comes out and he's no longer playing the last two games, which I don't know for sure that's going to happen. But if that does happen, what other guys are going to consider sitting out these last two to prepare for the NFL as well? I hope that more of this gets cleared up over the bye week and we know for sure what's going to happen going forward, but time will tell. I'm still hopeful for the future. I don't want this to all be negative. If you watch this game and you come away with it being negative, aside from being a loss, yes, loss sucks. But if you come away looking at the team in a negative light, then I think you need to go back and rewatch it, because there was a lot of good things that you've seen on the field against a good team. Ohio State's not a fake top 5 team. They were a good top 5 team. But that's going to wrap up this week's recap. We will be back here on Wednesday for another pregame. Oh, no, that's not true, because we have a bye week. So we will be back here. I'll probably try to do some more research to see who is all going to come back and kind of do a deep dive on stats for the whole season thus far, and try to kick out something on Wednesday anyway. Not sure if we'll do anything Sunday, but Wednesday I will kick out something, kind of a review of the season so far and what I think the team's going to look like going forward. Otherwise, if you like the video, comment down below. You can find me on Twitter at Cobsmacked Pod. But until next time, go Big Red.